north is more where
UK people need to understand that the governments are lying to us.
The British are now living under the very fascist type of influences that they fought.
you've got 50% scared to death, 20% that think there's something wrong with it, 30% that are fully awake and saying this is not right.
England is worse now than, in many ways, than Nazi Germany.
Don't vote Democrat. They just push out the narrative constantly.
Humanity awakens!
Everybody will get through this. We need to stick together.
It really is going to be a situation where we have to go rescue them again.
The whole thing is bollocks. You know, you're supposed to wear them in Selfridges, yet you can fucking go down the pub, be surrounded by every fucking cunt, you know what I mean? And it's like, oh, well, actually, we don't have the virus in the pub. Like, I was going up to Manchester the other week, and fucking some guys going, can you put your mask on the train? And I was like, and they said, because the transport police to get on there find you £1,000, but you don't have to put it on if you're eating. So I was saying, oh, right, so this killer virus that's sweeping through the train is going to come and attack me, but it's going to see me having a sandwich and go, leave him.
What's good about the mask is if someone's coughing next to you with coronavirus, the mask is going to lessen the dose you get, right? So if you breathe in a lot of it, your immune system, no matter how healthy you are, might be overwhelmed by it.
Mate, listen to me. There's too many fucking liberties been taken away from us now. Have you got a mask? No, I haven't. You have to wear a mask. Says who? Oh, well, says the manager. Who's the manager?
Yeah, but who are you kicking back against? Just like, because they've just told what to do.
I don't give a fuck. I choose not to wear one. If I get the virus, it's on me.
Yeah.
Right? It's not on anyone else. So if every other cunt's wearing a mask, I'm not going to catch it off them. Right? And if I've got it, they're not going to catch it off me. So fucking, I just think it's a piss take.
Welcome to another late night update. I'm your host, Dean Ryan. And tonight, we're going to have a very special look into an ongoing crisis that's developing as we speak. And that's all these lockdowns and tyranny that's currently happening in the UK. Now, we're going to speak to three different people, two of them from the UK, and then we're going to offer a special guest for an American perspective towards the end. Later, we're going to speak to two people in the city of Liverpool, a couple who have seen things that you're not hearing about on the news. And they've seen things happen in the city transform over time through this pandemic and all its new plot twists. But first, we're going to go to a young lady, a mother of two, who's now enduring all the COVID rules and regulations that the schools are enforcing on her and her sons. You're going to hear from a mother's perspective of exactly what's taking place in the United Kingdom. Get ready. What exactly is happening in Manchester that the world should know about?
We're constantly in lockdown at the moment. with, at first, because I live in Salford, but it's in this, it's like the Greater Manchester, it's all under one category. Basically, they put us on lockdown, that we're not allowed to visit anyone outside our households or go anywhere with anybody outside our households. However, we're allowed to, if we're a single family, you're allowed to have another family as a bubble. So you're allowed to do that. But other than that, you can go shopping, you can go drinking, you can go to a restaurant. The kids have gone back to school. So it makes no sense.
From my understanding, you have 2 children. Are they being forced to wear face masks?
No, my children are primary school age, so they're below 11, so they're not required to wear it, and they're going to be kept in their classes in a bubble. However, the high school children are told that in communal areas, walking to different classes, they have to wear a mask unless they're exempt.
Is there an uptick in this COVID-19 pandemic that you see? Just, do you know neighbors? Do you have friends that have it and people that die? So you don't know really anyone until the media tells you.
Until they say loads of people have been tested and the numbers have gone up.
Has risen again today, and health officials warn the worst is still to come.
What we are going to see is this huge wave of people requiring very high levels of treatment, and in that sense it is a tsunami.
Gone up, but we don't hear anyone dying. We've got friends that work in the hospital and they're saying that they're empty. There's not that many cases of ventilations or death.
What is the economy like currently in Manchester? Are there a lot of people working? Are there a lot of people being forced to stay home? Because I just recently heard, and I know you've sent me some information over the past month or so, that there's been a complete lockdown of gridlock areas around Manchester. So what is that like currently? Is there an economy on a downturn going forward into the wintertime?
Obviously, the building and construction firms, they're all quite happy, but you've got a lot of people that was let go from work. They haven't got jobs. They were paid over that period, but what they're going to do as we go into Christmas time.
Do you see more animosity between Prime Minister Boris, for example?
Yeah. His speeches recently.
With those disciplines of social distancing, we've kept that virus at bay. But we have to acknowledge that this is a great and freedom-loving country, and while the vast majority have complied with the rules, there have been too many breaches, too many opportunities for our invisible enemy to slip through undetected.
They just don't. He just waffles on. Nobody knows what's going on. I think the North is more aware of this pandemic than what the South is. We don't see that many people wearing masks as much in the shops, or they've got an exempt badge on saying they're not wearing it.
I get messages from people that saying my elderly mother was taken by the NHS. They never came back. I was not allowed to see them. Is that something you're seeing?
I heard a few cases of a few friends that had lumps, and in our country, you go to a GP first, a general practitioner. It's all NHS. You go there first, then you put on a cancer pathway, and then you're seen by the NHS, and there's a certain amount of time you should be seen and treated. Since the pandemic, they've stopped treatments, they've stopped surgeries. These people who've had small lumps that could have been treated are now on palliative care.
Is there a Chinese influence, from your knowledge, from what you see in the UK?
We didn't stop any flights. When we were on lockdown as a country, the flights were still coming in. We weren't shutting down flights. So if there was a deadly virus from China, why is there still Chinese flights?
What is the general consensus in Manchester about this entire COVID-19 coronavirus?
You've got 50% scared to death. Then you've got 50%, well, I would say probably 20% that think there's something wrong with it, but still follow what's been said. And then you've probably got 30% that are fully awake and saying, this is not right, there's something massively wrong here.
So in the past 24 hours, I have been inundated with messages from business owners. Yesterday here in England, the government decided to lock down all pubs and restaurants as of 10 p.m. at night.
I'm sorry that this will affect many businesses just getting back on their feet, but we must act to stop the virus from being transmitted in bars and restaurants. We are once again asking office workers who can work from home to do so.
We think that there should be restrictions in relation to funerals, in relation to numbers at weddings. We also think there's a real issue in relation to hospitality. We're keen to reduce the amount of hours pubs, bars and restaurants can be opened because that leads to, unfortunately, greater socialisation.
I had phone call all night. Is there a lockdown? Can we come for prayer? Or we can't come for prayer? You know, what's going on? Is there another lockdown? That really confused people.
The reason so many parts of England are now back in lockdown, and perhaps, who's to say, the rest of the country within 48 hours, it's all your fault. Despite being encouraged to go and get tests, it's now your fault because too many of you have gone to get tests. And now we learn that if you get a positive test and you leave your house, you'll be fined £1,000. Do it again and you'll be fined £10,000. But here's the worst bit. Suppose whether the information that's been given is accurate or not, you too, if you leave your house more than once, are subject to a £10,000 fine. And it's the same if you organise a big demonstration. Again, you could be fined £10,000. Oh, but if you want to go and desecrate the cenotaph, or vandalise Churchill's statue, topple statues and chuck them in the dock in Bristol, or even wear paramilitary uniforms and march through the streets of Brixton, well, that's fine, because you can pretty much guarantee that nothing will happen to you. Utterly and entirely disproportionate.
The voices that are speaking out against the draconian laws, this tyrannical takeover, communist takeover in England has really been coming from the north, and particularly Liverpool. So can you guys just, what is the atmosphere, what is the climate like currently in Liverpool, England?
Liverpool, you've got a very small portion of people that are still wearing the masks, still doing what the government tell them to do, like good little citizens.
It was more. As the ones who are wearing the masks are seeing people without the mask. It's like they're the weak in a way. I'm not calling them weak people, but they're not as strong. So they'll be the kind who would, oh well, they're not. I'm not going to either. Yeah. So you've seen a drop off, I think, in people wearing the masks a lot.
In London, you're having police actually attacking people for being in groups over like 30 or 15. The police here in Liverpool have got more of a relaxed approach. But to be honest, I do think as time's going on, there's more and more people that are waking up to what the government and knowing that the government are lying to us.
Efforts of NHS test and trace, that we are not only at a record high today, testing more people than any other European country, but to get to the point that he raised, Mr. Speaker, we're going to go up to 500,000.
Touching upon what you just said, you know, you if it wasn't for social media, if it wasn't for media in general, would we even know that COVID-19 exists?
We go to a lot of events and we know quite a wide variety of people, and we're talking in the thousands. And when you actually talk to people, nobody knows anybody that has had a positive test, anybody that's been in the hospital, or even been sick with anything like something other than a normal cold.
Anyone who has fallen to it, I've already had underlying conditions and been quite elderly anyway.
Yeah.
or had an underlying condition that they weren't even aware of, clogged arteries
We had a friend, she was very ill with cancer, battling cancer for like 4 or 5 years. She became very ill last year and ended up being housebound. She died in March. The coroner put COVID on her death certificate, and her son is now actually fighting with the coroner to have COVID taken off, because this lady never showed any symptoms of COVID. It was the cancer that killed her. She never had a COVID test in her life, and yet they've put COVID-19 on the death certificate.
Hearing this comes on the heels of the CDC here in America, in the United States, now saying, oh, by the way, 94% of the deaths due to COVID-19, they had other serious ailments that contributed to the death. And I'm thinking, well, duh, yes, of course they did. Do you see, I don't know if there's a CDC in England or something equivalent to maybe the NHS. Okay, so do you see that kind of information now coming out, like Americans are seeing it right here?
No, the British government are keeping things very, very tightly under wraps. We've got a website called gov.uk, and that's where you go for all of like Health England and, to find out about the virus. Well, what they've actually done is, where they used to give us the figures of how many people or how many COVID tests they have done that week, so you could work out the figures. What they've done is, because people are figuring out on their figures that it's not, flu's worse basically, what they've stopped doing is putting the amount of tests that they're doing each week on that website. So you can't do the calculations to find out what the percentage is of people dying or even testing positive for COVID.
Heaven and hell, the doors of perception. And of the two, people have taken heaven and hell as the symbol. And they've taken the wrong one. It's doors of perception. It's doors of perception. It's doors of perception. It's doors of perception. And that is what it's doors of perception.
The momentum has begun.
Look around you.
And the spirit of this place must sweep across the world.
Change your heart. Look around you.
If we are to stop Orwell's boot stamping on the human face forever.
Look around you. Change your heart. Look around you. Change your heart. Look around you. And of the two, people have taken heaven and hell as the symbol. And they've taken the wrong one.
Mike, what is the importance of the UK and US relationship?
Our two countries have been connected forever. I mean, we are an English colony. That's how our country started. It was basically an English colony. There were other countries over here, but ultimately it was the English-speaking colonists that formed the United States, rejected the rule of the British monarchy, and started the American Revolutionary War.
Freeze it!
But what most people don't realize is that the United States did not win the American Revolutionary War. Basically, the British gave us our freedom in return for a financial interest in the future of our country. And Cornwallis did not actually was not defeated by Washington. He simply surrendered his sword and said, okay, we're laying down our sword. And then we got what's called the Constitution, which is a financial document. It's not any, it doesn't tell us how our government works. It's a financial agreement. A constitutor is someone who takes basically agrees to pay the debts of another. And the United States had huge, massive debts to the Rothschild Bank of France and other people like that. And the King of England said, okay, look, tell you what, we'll secure your debt. You will go into bankruptcy, international bankruptcy, because you can't pay your debts, but we'll back you financially in return for X amount share of the profits of the United States government. And so our republic basically ceased to be a republic just in 1789 when the Constitution was ratified. So that relationship has been strong forever. That's why we had to be included in World War I and World War II, because we were still trying to pay off this debt to the Crown of England that we had owed since 1776, or actually 1789, when the Constitution was approved by both parties.
Outside of politics and outside of the historical realm of it, I really can't think of another country that has really been so influential, and vice versa, more than I think of Britain. And we're talking about pop culture, fashion,
sure,
music. So I want to talk about that from an American perspective that you have. What kind of influence in growing up and then as a young man and even today, with sports and such, has the UK been on the US?
Oh, I mean, our relationship, I think, with the Brits is closer than any other nation. I think we have more culturally in common, really, with Britain than we do with Canada, because the Canadians are very passive people. The Brits are much more aggressive. They had their entire empire out there, and the connection, our love for everything British and their love for everything American is something that just it intertwines. I mean, we love their music, we love their culture, we love their humor. You look at Monty Python, the cultural influence of British humor, Benny Hill. All these people that were just really influential and changed the way Americans did things in entertainment, the music, of course, the British invasion, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, all the bands at the beginning, on into Led Zeppelin, Irish bands like U2, and so forth in the 80s, the Police. So that relationship has continued, and amazingly, a lot of American artists are just as popular over there as their artists are over here. So it creates, a very deep bond in spite of the fact that they can't spell the word center correctly.
Yeah, that's so true. And back to what you just said, I recall being in North Wales years and years ago, and I went into this little corner shop in the middle of nowhere, and the guy found out I was American, and he says to me, he looked around and he looked at me and he goes, "I just want to let you know," and he goes, "Bon Jovi's God."
Yeah, it's sad. I mean, really all of the big important musical acts that influenced American culture were much better than I think the American acts that might have influenced British culture. I mean, you look at what's more important, Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, or we give them Budweiser. I mean, they give us the cream of their crop, and we give them our corporate crap. It's really kind of a sad. It's an unfair exchange. It really is an unfair exchange.
Oh, yeah.
And the Sex Pistols, they gave us punk rock. I mean, it's an incredible thing, and it's funny because I had always thought that the Pistols and the Clash, for instance, started the punk thing, but really, I guess it was kind of the New York bands, the Ramones a little bit, who influenced some of those bands at the beginning. At least I know U2 was heavily influenced by the Ramones, and I think the Pistols talked about it a little bit. But it's a diverse back and forth exchange of ideas and
absolutely. I mean, you look at Motown and how much did that influence so many British artists,
mm-hmm.
and you look at heavy metal and all kinds of stuff, and even acting. James Bond is just as big in the United States as it is in England, and you mentioned Monty Python and all these things. So it really is a close-knit family, I would say, more so than Canada.
Yeah, although Canada did give us Leslie Nielsen and William Shatner. We have to thank them for that. But other than that, the Canadians haven't done much for us culturally. So
one time about the visit that Trump made
mm-hmm.
to see the Queen and the royal family, almost, it feels like yesterday. It was a whole spectacle. You really touched upon some things that I didn't really see before until you mentioned it.
It's interesting because Trump kind of went on a world tour in 2017, 2018. And what's interesting about it is that everybody, if you look at their body language of all these world leaders, it was all basically submission. I mean, the Saudis were like this, and they're like, oh, come watch our sword ceremony, and please do this with us, and please do that with us. And even the Israelis were like, hey, well, if you can get us peace with our Arab neighbors, we'll go for it. But the big one was England. And they basically, the American press attacked Trump and said he didn't follow protocol, and, he didn't treat her very well. He walked in front of her, which is supposed to be a no-no, especially in her territory, on her ground in London. He's he's walking in front of her. He's not a step behind her or equal to her. Even the First Lady, Melania, was walking ahead of the Queen as they were going different places. And they said these are breaks in protocol, but they weren't breaks in protocol, because what had happened was that the United States was ending the debtor relationship with the Crown of England. That had all been bought off. The president basically said, look, the central bank that holds this debt, the Federal Reserve, which the British Crown and other creditors have owned for over 100 years, they're no more, he told them. They are done, and we are not paying that debt. And by the way, we have real gold. We have a real gold coin that says $25 trillion on it. It's got that stamped on it, and there you are, you're paid off. So what he went over there to do is to collect the Queen's signature on signing off on the United States as once again being sovereign and returning the United States to what it was supposed to be at the beginning, which is a republic, not a corporate democracy, which is what we've been stuck with ever since the American Civil War and the Act of 1871. So it was not that Trump was violating protocol. It's that he did not, he was not beholden to the Queen anymore. So what he was basically showing the world is, we don't walk behind you anymore. We stand in front of you because you are now our servant, not the other way around.
I was in England 8 years ago. I was living there briefly in Liverpool in the north, and I went to London. I've been to London several times, and I could tell you 8 years ago, it was a stark contrast of the just complete difference in the complete different of vibes you would get from the north compared to the south, where the north is kind of more real and kind of more down to earth. London is more of the Piccadilly circus. It's more of the tourist trap, but that's not what the real big difference is that I truly saw. What I truly saw was a difference of worldview.
Black, we are white, we're straight, we're gay, we're women, we're men.
Of point of view, of philosophy, in the sense that when I was hanging out in Manchester, they were disgusted with the royal family. They were disgusted with people from London and loved people from America. When I was in the South in London, it was the complete opposite. They called me, and Americans for that fact, they're barbaric cousins. They were just very snobby in a sense. So if we talk about revolution to get rid of all this stuff, or evolution, am I wrong to say that's going to start in the North?
No, I think you're absolutely correct, and that's a brilliant observation on your part, because I agree with it 100%. I think what you have in the South, in London, is you have, again, the old money, the old guard, old Europe is stuck there in London, very stodgy, and they've also imported, millions of Muslim immigrants, which are diluting their culture down there, whereas in the North, even though they've been forced to take on a lot of immigrants, they haven't quite bought into that as much. I mean, Manchester is a city I've been going to since the 1980s. I hate to admit it. I've been there 4 or 5 times now, and it is a thriving cosmopolitan city with an incredible future. It has beautiful girls now, which it didn't used to have when first time I went there. So it's almost as if English, the weight of English culture is shifting to the north, and I think a city like Manchester is going to be more important culturally and economically than London in due time, because London is in a self-destruct mode with, Mayor Sadiq Khan. He's dragging the whole city down and the country with it. So the weight of British culture is going to shift, I think, to the north, and I think it's very observant on your part to notice that.
I call him Sadiq Khan artist myself. So
yeah,
and to just add, mention on the show, the Real Deal Report that we do, and you mentioned that we need to save the UK, and it's way beyond diplomacy at this point, where you even mentioned and suggested it may have to be done militarily by the US, with Trump in the lead, to really take back the UK and give it back to the people.
The UK is committing cultural suicide. They are importing all these third world people from Muslim nations that are dragging their culture down, infesting their cities, sucking up their welfare, basically, ruining their country. And the old principles that they used to live under, the Magna Carta and some of the influences that led to our Bill of Rights, they don't have those over there. They don't have guns. They don't, the problem is that the British people are kind and compassionate, but they've shot themselves in the foot by being convinced that all this leftism, all this, let's bring in all these poor, bring them in and hug them. And now they're not becoming British, though. They're bringing their own third world problems to the United Kingdom, and they're dragging the United Kingdom down, London being a prime example, all the stabbings. And I think that the bombings in Manchester at the concert, that is probably going to start a real backlash in the North. And I do think, as we discussed a little earlier, you're going to see the backlash start in the North. And it may be a situation where we do have to go over and help them clean up their mess. Of course, we have to get our own mess cleaned up here first.
Deserve the right to have a chance of true freedom that a lot of these people have never really had, like the Chinese people. And, it's not that we want this class of people saved over this class. It's we want everyone to have this experience of freedom. And it's really sorry to say that the closest country to us, England, does not have even a slither of what we have right here in America. And it's really sad because that's where our culture stemmed from. You talk about beer, you talk about hamburgers and everything. So
it's our root culture. It really is our root culture. And it's ironic that the British are now living under the very fascist type of influences that they fought only 3 generations ago to defeat. And England is worse now than, in many ways, than Nazi Germany. You can post something on a tweet and go to jail for tweeting something. It's insanity.
Well, we'll see what happens. And it's probably going to take a Nigel Farage to really get out of this. And he certainly knows how to articulate the message.
If people want to come into the country from other countries and become British, great. But don't come into this country from Pakistan or someplace like that and try to turn England into Pakistan. That's what they've allowed to happen. That's what has to stop both in Germany and in England and in many other countries in Europe, or it really is going to be a situation where we have to go rescue them from themselves again for the 3rd time in 100 years. I really don't want to do that.
Well, they were led down a rabbit hole of broken promises. They said, if you are to get in the EU, it's going to be a trade alliance. Where they got bamboozled because it's been a political alliance where you don't have a say of who comes in and out of your country. If there's a poor Romanian, a generation of them, just bring them all in.
You had bureaucrats in Brussels who were trying to tell the British people they couldn't buy a teapot. Literally, it came to that. You couldn't buy a teapot because of global warming in England. That was the last straw for the British people. They've started the pushback, but now they have to get far more aggressive and elect not just the Tories, the Conservatives, but actually go for the Nigel Farage party. I forget their name. Brexit party, and really start shifting how they think and who they bring into their country. And maybe it's time for some of these other people to go home. Some of these refugees, maybe they need to go back to where they came from. Hopefully they've been Britishized a little bit, and they'll take some culture and some civilization back to where they came from and make those places a better place.
Mike Barrett, thank you very much, and we will keep in touch on this. And we. England, like so many other countries in the Commonwealth, have no way to protect themselves, no firearms. They're literally at the mercy of every bureaucrat of this New World Order conglomerate. So I hope we as Americans and free individuals can learn something from these countries that Late Night Update has investigated and brought to you to show you what exactly is happening behind the firewall of information. So for everybody here at the Real Deal Media Studios, I'm Dean Ryan signing off. Remember, stay tuned.
It's Stanley.
Don't vote Democrat. Vote for Trump.